The morning my wife's attorney told a judge I couldn't pay my daughter's school fees, I was sitting 6 feet away from her in a $9 Walmart shirt, drinking gas station coffee and saying absolutely nothing. Not because I had nothing to say, because what I had to say was going to be much more effective coming from someone else. Specifically, from a court clerk named D. Briggs, who at that exact moment had no idea what was about to happen when he typed my full legal name into his terminal. Neither did I, honestly. But we'll get to that. My name is Jack Harlan. I'm going to tell you something up front that most men in my position would save for the end, because I think you deserve to know what kind of story this is before we go any further. This is not a story about a man who got lucky. This is a story about a man who paid attention for 11 years to his business, to his instincts, and to the specific particular way that the truth has of arriving exactly when it's needed if you give it enough room and enough time. I didn't plan what happened in courtroom 3B on the morning of Tuesday, March 4th, 2025. But I was ready for it. I'd been ready for a while. Let me back up. My wife's name is Diane Harlan, née Calloway, 43 years old, real estate agent, the kind of woman who could walk into a room full of strangers and make every single person in it feel like she'd been looking for them specifically. That was the gift. For 11 years, I loved that about her. It was also, eventually, the problem. For the last 2 years of our marriage, Diane had been telling a very specific story about me to her friends, her mother, and eventually her attorney. The story went like this. Jack Harlan is a simple man, steady, reliable, not particularly ambitious, runs a small investment company out of a second-floor office on Commerce Street. Nothing flashy. The kind of man you marry when you want stability, and then spend a decade quietly outgrowing. She wasn't entirely wrong. I did run it out of Commerce Street. Back in 2014, by March of 2005, Harlan Capital Group occupied a full floor of a building 3 blocks from that Commerce Street office, had 14 acquisitions under management across 4 states, and employed a very patient accountant named Greg, who ran everything through a registered agent address in Delaware, specifically because I had never in my life felt the need to advertise what I'd built to people who hadn't earned the right to know. Corrine used to ask me why. Wait, wrong story, wrong man. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I just tell her? Because sometimes the most valuable thing a man can be is underestimated. And because I'd stopped telling Diane much of anything around the same time she got the second phone. When she served me the divorce papers last September, what I felt was not anger, it was relief. The specific relief of a man who has been carrying a tooth that needed pulling for 2 years and has finally sat down in the dentist's chair. You exhale. You think, okay, now we can deal with it. I called Ray Whitfield the next morning. 60 years old, former district judge. Suspenders, the real kind, the kind a man wears because he's decided they work and he's past caring what anyone thinks about it. 30 years of Texas courtrooms behind him. The kind of attorney who has heard every version of every human story and has developed over 3 decades a complete immunity to being impressed by any of them. Ray, I said. She filed. I know. Saw it this morning. A pause. Fight or settle? Neither, I said. Jack, you need to explain that. Not yet, I said. Trust me. Ray never loves answers that require him to hold incomplete information. But he'd worked with me long enough to know that when I said trust me in that specific tone, it was worth the wait. I had a plan, or the beginning of one. What I didn't have, what I couldn't have known, was that life was about to hand me something I never could have arranged on my own. Something that was going to walk into that courtroom in a charcoal blazer and make itself known before I had to do a single thing. I just had to be patient enough to let it arrive. Here's what Diane knew about my business life as of March 4th, 2025. Small investment company, Commerce Street office. Nothing impressive. Here's what her attorney, Stephanie Cole, had been building a case around for 6 months. A man who couldn't provide. A man with cash flow issues. A man who had been late, twice, on his daughter's private school tuition of $18,400 a year. Here's what neither of them knew. In 2021, I began quietly acquiring controlling stakes in mid-sized professional service companies through Harlan Capital Group. Legal groups, accounting firms, healthcare administration companies. Boring, stable, deeply profitable businesses that nobody writes magazine articles about. Nothing flashy, nothing that made noise. One of those acquisitions, March of 2022, was a 61% controlling stake in a Dallas-based legal services holding company called Meridian Professional Group. Meridian owned 7 law firms across Texas, including a mid-sized family law practice in Fort Worth called Kessler and Braun. I didn't think much about it. It was one of 14 acquisitions that year, a line item in a spreadsheet that Greg managed. I had absolutely no idea that 8 months later Diane would hire one of their attorneys. Her name was Stephanie Cole, late 30s, sharp dresser, the kind of attorney who carries her confidence like a weapon she never puts down. Not in court, not at the elevator, not at lunch. She had a smile that said, "I am going to take everything you have, and by the time I'm done, you're going to thank me for it." What I didn't know, what she absolutely did not know, her paycheck, direct deposited every 2 weeks without fail, flowed from Kessler and Braun, up through Meridian Professional Group, straight into Harlan Capital Group. To me, for 6 months, Stephanie Cole had been meticulously building a case designed to financially dismantle the man who was, in every technical and legal sense of the word, her employer's majority shareholder. I found this out approximately 45 minutes before she did. The morning of March 4th started the way the important mornings always do. Quietly. 5:30 a.m. Kitchen window. Our house on Ridgecrest Drive in Westover Hills. 4 bedrooms, backed up to a creek, the kind of house that feels different at that hour, before the day has started deciding what it's going to be. Diane was already moving upstairs, dressed, armored. We'd been living in the same house as near strangers for 8 months. She'd moved to the guest room last July, and we'd gotten very good at occupying the same space without actually being in it together. Lily was at my mother's house, 9 years old, obsessed with horses, and operating under the understanding that both her parents had work meetings today. 9-year-olds are perceptive enough to know when something is wrong, and young enough to fill the silence with things scarier than the truth. We'd agreed, one of maybe 3 things Diane and I had agreed on in 2 years, that Lily needed to be somewhere else today. I thought about her the whole drive downtown. I parked on Houston Street, 2 blocks to the courthouse, through security. Elevator to the 3rd floor. Courtroom 3B. The hallway smelled like old carpet and fluorescent light, the way courthouses always smell, like the building itself has absorbed decades of accumulated anxiety and stopped trying to hide it. Ray was already at our table, reviewing documents with the focused calm of a man who charges $450 an hour and has earned every penny of it for 30 years running. He looked up when I walked in. His eyes went directly to the shirt. "That," he said, "is a choice." "Walmart," I said. $9.97. I sat down, put my coffee on the table. "How are we looking?" "Fine." He said it carefully, the way Ray says things when he's choosing not to say the other thing. "Jack, is there anything you want to tell me before we start? You're wearing a $9 shirt to a divorce hearing where the opposing attorney is going to stand up and tell this court you can't pay your daughter's school fees." "I know." "And your response to that is, relax." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he opened his folder and went back to his documents. "Good man, Ray." Stephanie Cole arrived 7 minutes later. Diane right behind her. Stephanie, charcoal blazer, heels, leather portfolio, that smile. Diane, blue dress, careful makeup. The expression of a woman who has already decided how today ends and is simply waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. They took their table. Stephanie set down her portfolio, uncapped her pen, and glanced across the courtroom at me. Her eyes landed on the shirt. I watched her process it. The slight pause, the almost invisible recalibration, the specific look of a person who is expecting a challenge and has just realized they're not going to get one. Easier than I thought. That's what she was thinking. I could read it as clearly as a billboard. She leaned toward Diane and said something quiet. Diane looked at me and looked away. All rise. Judge Patricia Holt entered through the side door, 60 years old, silver hair, reading glasses on a chain. The expression of someone who has heard every version of every human story and is no longer surprised by any of them, but is still, professionally, paying very close attention. She sat, arranged her papers, looked at both tables. "We're here in the matter of Harlan versus Harlan. Petitioner's counsel, you may proceed." Stephanie Cole stood up. What she did over the next 40 minutes was, and I will give her this, impressively thorough. 6 months of preparation, presented with precision. custody arrangement, asset division, spousal support, spreadsheets, highlighted exhibits. A coherent, detailed, entirely convincing narrative about a man who had consistently failed to provide for his family at the level his family required. And then she got to the part I'd been waiting for. Your Honor, the pause of someone who knows their next line lands. My client's daughter attends Willowbrook Academy. Annual tuition, $18,400. Mr. Harlan has been delinquent on the last 2 installment payments. He has cited, she checked her notes, cash flow issues as the reason. She let that sit. Then, Your Honor, he can't even pay our daughter's school fees. The courtroom was quiet. I took a sip of my gas station coffee. Ray slid his legal pad across the table. I looked down. Now? I pushed it back. Not yet, he exhaled the quiet exhale of a man counting backward from 10. Judge Holt made a note. Mr. Whitfield, your client's response? Ray stood, buttoned his jacket. Your Honor, my client would like to enter his full legal name for the court record at this time. Routine. Procedural. So completely ordinary that Stephanie Cole didn't even look up from her portfolio. Proceed, said Judge Holt. Ray looked at me. I leaned toward the microphone. Jackson Meridian Harlan. The court clerk, young guy, mid-20s. Name tag read D. Briggs, typed it into his terminal, and stopped. He leaned toward the screen, typed something else, leaned closer, typed again. I watched his face change. Subtle. The particular stillness of a person reading something they weren't expecting. He sat with it for 2 full seconds. Then he stood, murmured something to the judge's assistant, and walked quickly, not running, but with the purpose of someone who absolutely has somewhere to be right now, out the side door of the courtroom. Stephanie Cole looked up. Diane looked at Stephanie. Stephanie looked at the door the clerk had just gone through. Judge Holt looked at Ray. Ray looked at me. I drank my coffee. Here we go. If you've been listening for a while and want stories like this to keep coming, sweet family revenge and drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. City, state, country. Let's see how far this story travels. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. That is how long D. Briggs was gone. I know because I watched the second hand on the clock above the jury box the way you watch the door of an emergency room, willing it to move faster and knowing it won't. The courtroom had changed while he was gone. I can't describe it exactly except to say that rooms have a pressure to them, a temperature almost. And this one had shifted. The ordinary Tuesday morning energy of a working courthouse, papers, chairs, low ambient noise, had gone completely still, like the moment before a storm when every bird and every tree stops at the same time. Stephanie Cole had stopped writing. Lawyers don't stop writing. That's almost a biological function. The pen keeps moving no matter what. Notes, margin scribbles, meaningless loops. If a lawyer's pen has gone still, something has cut through the professional layer and reached the actual person underneath. Something had. Diane was staring at her hands. Ray was studying his folder with the focused intensity of a man who memorized it an hour ago and is now using it as cover. Judge Holt had folded her hands on the bench and was watching the side door with the settled patience of a woman who has learned over 23 years that the most important moments in a courtroom almost always come through that exact door without warning. I drank my coffee. It was terrible coffee, gas station cappuccino, the kind that tastes like someone described coffee to a machine that had never actually experienced it. Thin, slightly too sweet, completely unsatisfying. I drank it slowly anyway, because I had made exactly one decision walking into this building besides the shirt, that I was going to be the calmest person in this room for as long as it took, no matter what happened. The side door opened. D. Briggs walked back in carrying a single sheet of paper, white, standard letter size, held slightly away from his body the way you carry something still warm from the printer. He walked directly to Judge Holt's bench without looking at anyone, placed it face down in front of her, leaned in, said 4 words too quiet for the room to hear, then went back to his station. Judge Holt picked up the page, read it once, top to bottom. No expression, no reaction. Set it face down. Then she looked at Stephanie Cole. Not Diane. Not Ray. Not me. Stephanie Cole specifically. The way a judge looks at someone when what she's about to say is going to require that person to sit down very carefully. Counselor, are you currently employed by Kessler and Braun LLP? A pause, small enough that you'd miss it if you weren't watching for it. I am, Your Honor. And is Kessler and Braun a member firm of Meridian Professional Group, based in Dallas? I believe that's correct. Judge Holt picked up the page one more time, read it again, set it down with the careful deliberateness of someone placing something that can't be unplaced. Are you aware, she said, in the tone of a person who already knows the answer and is asking as a professional formality and nothing else, that the principal majority shareholder of Meridian Professional Group, listed at 61% controlling interest, is one Jackson Meridian Harlan? What followed was not silence the way a room is normally silent. It was the silence of a specific kind of understanding, arriving at a specific person at a specific moment. The silence of a floor becoming air beneath someone's feet. Stephanie Cole turned, slowly, the way people turn when they already know what they're going to see but haven't accepted it yet. She looked at me. For the first time since she'd walked into courtroom 3B that morning, the smile was completely, entirely gone. There it is, I thought. That's the real face. Her pen dropped, hit the edge of the table, bounced once, clattered onto the floor in the space between our two tables. Neither of us moved to pick it up, right here. Before I go any further, because what happens next? The bench conference? The 9 minutes? What Ray said when he came back? What Diane said to me across the empty room? And what Gerald Braun said when I answered his phone call in the courthouse parking garage is the part of this story that is going to stay with you. But first, if you're watching this on Sweet Family Revenge and you haven't subscribed yet, do it right now, this second. While Stephanie Cole is standing there without an expression on her face and her pen is still on the floor, hit subscribe, ring the bell, because part 3 is coming, and I promise you on Lily's entire collection of horse figurines and every one of Ray Whitfield's suspenders, you do not want to miss how this ends. And before we go back into that courtroom, drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. City, state, country, wherever you are right now in the world. This whole thing started on a Tuesday morning in Fort Worth, Texas, and I genuinely want to know how far it traveled. Someone out there is watching this right now and thinking about their own version of that courtroom, their own shirt they should have worn, their own name they should have said out loud a long time ago. Maybe that's you. We'll get back to Stephanie's face in just a moment. It's not going anywhere. Here is what I had not planned. I'd planned the shirt, the coffee, the stillness, the moment of saying my name. I'd planned for the clerk to find the filing and for the document to reach that bench. What I had not planned, what genuinely surprised me, was Diane. I'd expected anger. That was the logical response. The look I'd been getting for 2 years, through me, past me, at the furniture version of me. Instead, she started crying. Not the careful crying from our last mediation session, the strategically timed kind with a tissue she'd clearly thought about in advance. This was different. This was the sound of a floor giving way. The sound of a person realizing that the ground they were standing on wasn't what they thought it was. I hadn't expected that. And I'm not going to pretend it didn't reach somewhere in me. 11 years is 11 years. You don't just switch it off. The pipes corroded badly on the way to the end, but the line was real once. I kept my face still because the hearing wasn't over. But I heard her, and I registered it, and I stored it somewhere to deal with when there was time. Judge Holt gave the room 30 seconds. Exactly 30. Then she picked up her gavel, didn't use it, just held it, and said, "Both counsels at the bench." Now, Ray stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked forward with the unhurried pace of a man who has been waiting for this moment since 9 a.m. and has billed for every minute of the wait. Stephanie stood more slowly. She bent first to pick up her pen. I noticed her hand was steady. Give her that. She recovered fast. Professionals always do. I watched the 3 of them at the bench. Judge Holt did most of the talking. Low, controlled reading glasses now on rather than on the chain. Ray nodded twice. Stephanie nodded once, shook her head, then nodded again. Then Diane leaned toward me. First time she'd spoken to me directly since we'd walked in. "Did you know?" Quiet. "Did you know she worked for you?" "No," I said. "I didn't." She searched my face for the seam in it, the place where the honesty cracked and let the strategy show through. I let her look as long as she needed. "Jack, Diane, even and low, let them do their job, pressed her fingertips to her closed eyes. I meant every word of it, by the way. I genuinely had not known. The Meridian acquisition was 3 years old and 6 corporate layers removed from anything I thought about on a Tuesday morning. I had 14 acquisitions. I knew the financials. I did not know the individual attorney rosters of the 7 firms inside one of them. Life had arranged this part entirely on its own. I was just the man who said his name. 9 minutes, that's how long the bench conference ran. When Ray came back, he sat down, opened his folder, and spoke without looking up. Stephanie Cole has filed for emergency recusal. Conflict of interest. Undisclosed. Can she do that mid-hearing? She just did. Judge Holt accepted. He turned a page. Hearing paused. Pending reassignment of opposing counsel. Timeline? 30 to 60 days minimum. He looked at me over his reading glasses. Jack, every dollar Diane paid Kessler and Braun over the last 6 months. I know, flowed through Meridian. Ray, I know. A long look, the specific look of a man recalibrating something fundamental. Did you plan this? I planned the shirt, I said. He stared at me. And the name, I added. The name is just your name, Jack. That's what made it work. He shook his head slowly and went back to his folder. Hearing adjourned at 11:14 a.m., Stephanie gathered her things with the efficiency of muscle memory. The thinking part of her brain was somewhere else entirely. She didn't look at me again. Diane stayed seated after everyone else had stood, hands in her lap, staring at the table. I picked up my empty coffee cup and walked toward the door. Jack. I stopped. She was standing. The courtroom nearly empty. Ray near the back, giving us the appearance of privacy. Blue dress. Makeup the morning had already worn through at the edges. I didn't think you'd actually fight, she said. I'm not fighting, I said. Then what are you doing? I thought about Lily at my mother's front door that morning. Both arms around me, face pressed into my jacket, holding on 1 extra second, the way she does when something is wrong and she can't name what it is. I'm just telling the truth, I said, in the right order. She had nothing to say to that. I walked out. Gerald Braun called a third time while I was standing on the courthouse steps watching a pigeon work through someone's abandoned breakfast burrito with the dedicated focus of an attorney reviewing a deposition. I let it ring, not to make a point. I let it ring because I'd just walked out of a courtroom where 11 years of a marriage had quietly, officially, begun their final rearrangement. And I needed 45 uninterrupted seconds of doing absolutely nothing before the next thing started. Some moments you only get once. You should be present for them. Ray appeared beside me, keys already in hand. Braun again? Third time in 20 minutes. Nervous man. He clicked his key fob. Dark blue Buick. The car of a man who stopped caring about cars sometime around 1980 and has never looked back. That's either very good for you or very complicated. Why can't it be both? He considered this seriously. With you, Jack, it's always both. He opened his door. Call me after. Before you agree to anything. I mean it. Before you agree to anything. Ray, he drove away. Fair point. I sat in my F-150 in the courthouse parking structure and played Gerald Braun's voicemail on speaker. His voice was exactly what you'd expect from a 60-year-old man who had spent 3 decades being very careful about what he said in recording range of anything. Measured, deliberate, every word placed like furniture arranged for a specific impression. But underneath all of that precision, if you listened the way you learned to listen after enough years in business, there was something else. Fear, not panic. The controlled, managed fear of a man who has read a specific number on a specific document and understood immediately and completely what it means for him personally. Mr. Harlan. Gerald Braun, senior founding partner at Kessler and Braun. I believe we've both recently become aware of a significant overlap in our professional circumstances. I'd very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with you privately before this matter develops further. I'm available at any time today, any time at all. Please. I stopped it there. Any time at all. A founding partner of a 30-year firm. Available any time at all. For a man he had never spoken to before this morning. I called him back. He answered before the first ring finished. Mr. Harlan. Just my name. The audible relief of a man finally setting something heavy down. Mr. Braun. Got your messages. Yes. Thank you for calling back. The sound of a door closing on his end. I'll be direct if I may. I became aware this morning of the ownership relationship between Harlan Capital Group, Meridian Professional Group, and our firm, and of what that means regarding Miss Cole's representation of your wife. I want you to know, I had absolutely no knowledge of this when she was assigned the case. None. This was not coordinated, there was no intent. Mr. Braun. Calm. I know. A silence that went longer than expected, you know? I didn't know Stephanie Cole worked for your firm until Dee Briggs walked back through that door this morning, I said. The Meridian acquisition was 3 years ago. I manage 14 acquisitions. I know the numbers. I don't track individual attorney assignments at member firms. I paused. Life arranged this part, not me. The silence that followed had a different quality, like pressure leaving a room. Then the shirt, he started, was because her attorney spent 6 months telling a story about a man who couldn't afford things. I said, I wanted to see exactly how far she'd take it. And your name is just my name, Mr. Braun. I heard him exhale. Long, complicated. The exhale of a man who has been holding something specific for 3 hours and is finally, carefully putting it down. I'd like to meet with you, he said, in person. Today. I'll be there at 2. Kessler and Braun occupied the 14th floor of a glass office building on West 7th Street. The kind of building that exists to make clients feel the elevation is part of what they're paying for. Lobby fountain, touch panel elevator, receptionist who used my first name before I gave it to her. Gerald had done his homework. He met me at the elevator himself, tall, silver-haired. The handshake of a man who has thought carefully about handshakes for 30 years and knows exactly what his conveys. Mr. Harlan, thank you for coming. Jack, I said. Jack. He nodded once. The nod of a man accepting a small and appreciated concession. Come in. Corner office. Of course it was. Floor-to-ceiling windows. The Trinity River and downtown Fort Worth in the afternoon light. Solid, unpretentious. A city that has seen enough to stop being impressed by most things. His desk was old wood, real wood, the desk of a man who has been here long enough to stop needing to prove it. Real coffee was waiting on the side table. I drank it anyway. We sat. He folded his hands. Stephanie Cole submitted her resignation this morning, he said, effective immediately. I hadn't expected the speed. Her choice. We presented her with options. Carefully, professional. Given what was said in open court, on the record, about a man who turned out to hold majority ownership of our parent company, it was felt that her continued presence created a liability profile the firm wasn't in a position to carry. I thought about the charcoal blazer, the smile, the pen on the floor. I'm not going to tell you I feel sorry about that, I said. I wouldn't expect you to. He reached into the folder on his desk and slid a document across to me. I looked at it without picking it up. Complete accounting of every fee paid to Kessler and Braun by your wife over the past 6 months, he said. $41,200. I want to return it. All of it. Not as settlement, not as legal resolution, as the right thing to do. Whatever the corporate structure says about how those funds flowed, that money was paid to a firm that was actively working against its own majority shareholder. That's wrong. I've been in this profession long enough to know the difference between what's technically defensible and what's actually right. I sat with that. Fort Worth outside the windows. Solid. Unbothered. Gerald, I said. Yes. Keep the money. He blinked. The genuine blink of a man who prepared for several possible responses and didn't have this one. I'm sorry. Don't return it to Diane, I said. Put it in a trust. For my daughter. Her name is Lily Harlan. Willowbrook Academy, Tarrant County. She's 9 years old and she's currently more interested in horses than in anything else on earth. I picked up my coffee. Tuition is $18,400 a year. $41,000 covers 2 years and some change. That works for me. Gerald Braun looked at me across his old real desk for a long moment. Then he smiled. Not the professional one. The other one. The one that lives underneath all of that. The one that belongs to the actual person. Jack, he said. I genuinely misjudged what kind of man you were. Most people do, I said. It's the shirts. I called Ray from the parking garage. Talk to me, He said, "No hello." Cole resigned. Braun offered to return the fees. I put them in a trust for Lily instead. 2 years of school. A silence on the line. Jack, that's a pause. The pause of a man making sure what he says next is exactly what he means. That's a genuinely good outcome. I know. For everyone, he said carefully, including Diane. I know. I thought. Didn't say it. The case, I said instead. Diane needs new counsel. 30 to 60 days before anything moves. Her position has, he chose the word, shifted, substantially. Lily? His voice changed slightly, the way Ray's voice changes when he's about to say something he's been sitting on for a while. Jack, you have always had a strong custody argument. The financial picture, the stability, it was always there. Today just made it impossible for anyone in that building to overlook. I sat in my truck in a concrete parking garage on West 7th Street and stared at a pillar and thought about a 9-year-old girl at her grandmother's front door that morning. Both arms, face pressed into my jacket, holding on 1 extra second, holding on. Ray, yeah, already working on it, he said. And I could hear in his voice, the same way I'd heard the fear in Braun's voice, underneath everything professional, that he meant it absolutely. I drove home to Ridgecrest Drive. The house was quiet. Diane wasn't back yet. The March afternoon light was coming through the kitchen window at that low, slightly forgiving angle that March does. The kind of light that makes even ordinary things look like they belong somewhere. I made real coffee, stood at the window, my phone buzzed. Text from my mother, Lily wants to know if you're coming for dinner. She says she has something important to show you, about a horse. I stood there a moment reading that, then typed back, tell her I'll be there at 6. Tell her to save me the seat next to her. Set my phone on the counter, looked out at the creek behind the house, catching the last of the afternoon light. Here's what I want to say before this story ends. I didn't walk into that courtroom on a Tuesday morning to destroy anyone. I put on a $9 shirt. I said my full name into a microphone. I drank bad coffee. And I let the truth do what truth does when you give it enough room and enough time, arrive exactly when it's needed, and say everything you never had to. Stephanie Cole lost her job. She made her choices in that courtroom loudly and on the record. I didn't make them for her, but she still has a daughter who draws horses on everything and loves her mother completely and will never stop. Gerald Braun did the right thing when every piece of paperwork would have let him do otherwise. I have more respect for that than I expected to. And Lily, my Lily, 9 years old, obsessed with horses, 1 extra second at the door, is going to have 2 years of school paid for by the legal fees that were supposed to be used to take her away from me. If that's not sweet revenge, I genuinely don't know what is. If this hit you somewhere real, if you felt that moment when the clerk stopped typing, if you smiled when Gerald Braun smiled, if you thought about your own kid holding on 1 extra second at the door, then you already know why sweet family revenge exists. This channel is for every quiet man and woman who ever sat in a room full of people who had completely misjudged them and chose to let the truth do the talking. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it right now. Hit that button. Ring the bell. YouTube won't tell you when the next story drops unless you do. And the next one is coming, and it is worth being here for. One last thing before you go. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. City, state, country. Wherever you are in the world right now. This story started in a Fort Worth courtroom on a Tuesday morning in March, and I want to know exactly how far it traveled. Someone out there is watching this thinking about their own Walmart shirt, their own name they haven't said yet, their own truth they've been waiting for the right moment to tell. The right moment is closer than you think.